Ryan Clark is on the line with yours truly as we speak. What's going on, man? How are you?
What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Before I even get into any football conversation, you and I need to have a basketball talk because obviously, you know, you've listened to me. You've listened to my words of wisdom that I have espoused upon you throughout the years. And you have been definitely outspoken because you watch your basketball and you know your basketball. I went on the air and had the temerity, the unmitigated goal to say that LeBron James right now does not look like the best player in the world, and he doesn't need to be talked about as if he's the best player in the world at this particular juncture. To that you say what, Ryan Clark?
I say you're right. But I also say there's no way at the beginning of the season that I believe we would be having this conversation. When you look at the way he was playing before the groin injury, he had this team in the top 5
That's right.
in the West. He was playing ball that had him in the MVP conversation, and this team looked like it could possibly make the run to the Western Conference Finals that you were saying they could. But since coming back, he isn't playing with energy. It still seems to me like he's not 100% healthy. And also, too, though, we're seeing some things from a leadership standpoint that I don't like to see in LeBron.
I was getting ready to go there with you about that because to me, the kind of things that we're seeing about LeBron James at this particular juncture in terms of really, really lamenting the state of affairs with the Lakers, talking about the younger players on the squad, et cetera, it's almost tantamount to what we've been saying about Big Ben Roethlisberger.
You just took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, you know, we have been down on Ben Roethlisberger's forms of leadership, you know, ever since Antonio Brown came out and spoke up about him. But I believe LeBron has been the same way. And also another part of LeBron's leadership is his mannerisms on the court, right? Some of the pouting, the outwardly showing his displeasure with the things that his teammates are doing. And then after the game, in his post-game comments or anytime he speaks to the media, pointing out what the other people on the team are not doing, basically saying, you know what, it's not me. I've been there before. You know who I am. You know that I'm one of the greatest basketball players of all time. So clearly if we aren't winning, it's nothing I'm doing. They just don't understand the moment. And if I'm one of those young guys on the team, one, you tried to trade us all for one player. And now, number two, the best basketball player in the world, or the guy who we see as that or who came into the season as that, is now pointing out what we can't do. That's a tough environment for a young player to succeed.
I know football is your background. We're talking to Ryan Clark, NFL analyst extraordinaire, Super Bowl champion with the Pittsburgh Steelers, right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. I know that as a professional athlete and as a professional football player, your expertise is football, but I'm still going to stick with this basketball issue for one reason and one reason only. When we talk about LeBron James and we talk about the way he's elected to communicate, when we talk about Magic Johnson as president of basketball operations, a 5-time champion, a Hall of Famer, renowned for being a basketball savant, talk to me about what you alluded to the young players and you said, well, he tried to trade us all. Do you really feel as a young player LeBron tried to trade us all, or do you feel like Magic Johnson tried to trade us all? Which one are you thinking about?
I think you believe it's both. Right, you definitely believe that Magic Johnson was the orchestrator of who was up on the trade block or who they were willing to offer. But this was at the behest of LeBron James, Anthony Davis. Those two guys want to link up, and LeBron was speaking about wanting to play with Anthony Davis before any of this news even broke, before Anthony Davis made it public to us that he wanted to be traded, and before they went to the Pelicans and said they weren't going to re-sign there. And so if you're a part of that team, and you know how basketball works, Stephen A., you've covered it for so long, it's not like football. One player can control what organizations do. And when that one player is LeBron James, when you bring LeBron James there to win a championship and nothing else, if he wants a player, you do whatever it takes to get him. And so when you're a young player, you feel like LeBron was part of that, but you also feel Magic Johnson. The thing for me that would resonate with me as a young player is, though, I expect that from Magic Johnson, right? That's Magic Johnson's job. His job is to try to get the best player that he can possibly get on this team in order for this team to win. But when you feel like your leader, your teammate, supposed to be your brother, is a huge part of that, that's something that takes a little bit longer to get over.
Yeah, but they are in L.A. We're talking about Tinseltown. We're talking about Hollywood. You're talking about trying to make the playoffs for the first time in 6 years. To me, he shouldn't have to babysit them. They should be ready to roll because what do you want to do? Get traded to Detroit? Or Utah someplace rather than Lala? I would imagine that you're incentivized enough where you should be bringing forth whatever A game you've got inside of you, one would imagine.
So, yeah, 100%. I mean, they have to understand that they're independent contractors as well. As much as you want the Lakers to win and you want to do well, with the way the NBA works and the trade deadline and trade deadline and the way that people move around, you can be on a different team whenever. Right? Like one day you could be playing in Los Angeles and the next day you could be playing in Portland. That's just the way this game works. So you need to go out every day and make things happen. You need to go out every day and prove your worth. And this team, these young players aren't doing that right now, which is probably another huge reason the Pelicans weren't willing to have the New Orleans Lakers built with those same type of people because they didn't believe that they had what it takes to win games.
Ryan Clark right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Let's get back to some news items in the world of football. By the way, the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Pick from a range of coverage options with the Name Your Price tool to find a price that works for you. Plus, get triple action protection for optimal engine performance with Shell V-Power Nitro, plus premium gasoline. Ryan Clark, let's transition to your world, your level of expertise. That is the sport of football, but for obviously different reasons than we would like to be discussing. Robert Kraft, the owner for the New England Patriots, in the news for all the wrong reasons, soliciting prostitution, and that was associated with a sex trafficking ring, although he has not been accused of such a thing, just a misdemeanor charge of soliciting prostitution. Clearly a big embarrassment to him, but in light of Roger Goodell in the league, basically, putting forth a $500,000 fine to Jim Irsay, along with a suspension of 6 games because he pled guilty to a DWI charge back in 2014. What do you anticipate may happen to Robert Kraft after all the dust settles?
I definitely feel like at least that, right? When you look at what Jim Irsay did and now you look at Robert Kraft and the black eye this has caused the Kraft family, the Patriots, and also the NFL, you know that something is going to be done. Roger Goodell has said that in many cases he holds owners to a higher standard than he would the actual player. So once this all plays out, I'm pretty sure that we'll see a heavy fine. There may be draft picks involved, and I believe that there will also be a suspension of some sort for Robert Kraft. I think the biggest thing is just the embarrassment that all this causes, right? To continuously be brought up in the manner that Robert Kraft has to be as we cover this, as we give our opinions on it. I think, to me, that's larger than anything or any fine, any suspension that the NFL and Roger Goodell could lay down. This is a man who is respected by me.
Yeah, me too.
CBA, in CBA negotiations, he was one of the owners that we felt like we could speak with, we could talk to, was level-headed, didn't necessarily treat the players like just the labor. And so to have this happen is definitely just for his legacy, for who we know Robert Kraft to be. I believe to be associated with this is punishment within itself.
I agree with you, but if you're Roger Goodell, I mean, what else do you do? Do you pull him from committees? Because he's obviously been a very, very strong voice on behalf of the National Football League, but also serving as somewhat of a liaison to the players because the players trust him and obviously respect him a great deal and are willing to listen to him more so than they're willing to listen to other owners. Do you remove somebody like that from the committee? Do you make that decision yourself if you're Roger Goodell? Do you consult with other owners before making that decision? How does this get handled?
Yeah, I think you definitely have to consult with the other owners. Obviously, those are the people that Roger Goodell works for, and you speak to them about what they feel the perception of continuing to keep Robert Kraft on these committees or having Robert Kraft speak for the owners as a whole. How do they feel about a man who has now been accused of allegedly soliciting prostitution? How do you feel about that guy being the face of something that you do? And I think that what the owners say will go a long way into that. But Roger Goodell is going to have to think in protecting the shield, right? We hear that so many times when it comes to players, just about protecting the shield. So Robert Kraft will have to be treated in the same way.
Ryan Clark right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Let's transition to a different subject. That would be Antonio Brown on the football field. Speculation as to where he may end up, where he should end up, now that he's made it clear to the Pittsburgh Steelers he doesn't want to be there any longer, and the Pittsburgh Steelers have declared a willingness to abide by his wishes. What do you anticipate happening with Antonio Brown?
I think a lot of those talks will go on this week at the Combine. Kevin Colbert has already said 3 teams have reached out to him about Antonio Brown. I expect there to be more. It's going to be about what he's asking to get in return for Antonio Brown, because you have to buy the whole Antonio Brown experience. It's not just this player that we watch on the field that we think is one of the all-time greats, one of the top 3 wide receivers in the league today. It's going to be the off-the-field stuff. It's going to be the locker room stuff. It's going to be the personality that you have to deal with and make sure you keep happy. And so for me, it's going to be an NFC team. The San Francisco 49ers have been mentioned. I would love to see him in Green Bay and be a part of that. But, what he has to try to avoid is going somewhere like the Redskins, who need a wide receiver, who don't necessarily even know who their quarterback will be next year. So this could end up not being the great thing that Antonio Brown wanted.
If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, aren't you tempted to send him to a situation like the Redskins as opposed to sending him to Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, sending him to San Francisco with Jimmy Garoppolo, sending him to the Indianapolis Colts, even though we know he's not going to an AFC team with Andrew Luck? Aren't you tempted to send Antonio Brown to a place where there isn't a great quarterback?
Hey, I am that petty, Stephen A. I would 100% try to send him somewhere where he's not going to catch any balls, where they're not going to win, where he would be totally frustrated. But, I don't know if Kevin Colbert and the organization, Mr. Rooney, are going to have the opportunity to pick that, because obviously it'll be about which team is a suitor for Antonio Brown. But I would definitely, if all things the same, I feel like I can get the same amount of draft picks from whatever team, I would definitely try to send him to a place where he would be unhappy.
Is it
just because of the way that he forced himself out?
Is it possible that his histrionics, his belligerence, whatever you want to call it, may potentially cost the Steelers the ability to get a first-round pick for him?
I think it's going to be hard. I do. I think when teams look at Antonio Brown, also look at the fact that he wants guaranteed money now on the 3 years left on his contract, I believe it's going to be extremely hard to force a team into a first-round pick. And obviously that's what they're going to want. They're going to look at the Amari Cooper trade and say that we should get at least the same thing the Oakland Raiders got in return for Amari Cooper. But it's a different situation. It's a different personality. And it's a guy who's been very public with the way that he's gone about getting this trade. And I do think that teams will use that against the Steelers in the negotiation process.
So if they use it against the Steelers, and Kevin Colbert has made it very, very clear, there's not a giveaway situation. It's not some flea market sale. We're going to get equitable compensation for Antonio Brown, and because of the Amari Cooper trade to Dallas, it's presumably worth a first-round pick, rather. Is it possible that if the Steelers aren't able to garner that from an opposing team, that they make the decision to keep Antonio Brown as a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers?
It's starting to feel like they can't, right? It's starting to feel like they're going to have to move him and accept a lesser trade than they're hoping for. Just with Antonio being so set on leaving. The spectacle, the spectacle that he's made this already makes it hard for him to come back into that locker room and be with Ben Roethlisberger and be with Coach Mike Tomlin. And I think with those things involved, they're going to be forced to move him no matter what the options are.
One of the things that I said to you early on TV was that I think that this year, when it comes to Big Ben Roethlisberger, and you added Mike Tomlin to the mix, they've never been under more pressure than they will be this upcoming season. I want to know if you agree with that and why.
I just think that I 100% agree with you. For Ben Roethlisberger, not only is his play going to be in question, but his leadership, Stephen A. Right? This has been something that we've been focused on with him now since Antonio Brown brought it up. And I think, there were there have been pieces done on Ben's leadership for years now. Now Kevin Colbert comes out and says he's the unquestioned leader. This is the guy we're backing. So now he has to go on the field and prove it. And not only prove that, he has to conduct himself in a way that doesn't draw negative attention to the way he's leading this team. And then on the other side of that, there's Mike Tomlin, right? You lose Le'Veon Bell to free agency. You get nothing in return for him. Now Antonio Brown has forced his way out of the organization very publicly, right? This man decided to not even come to work under your tenure, under your tutelage. And so now what are you going to do with the team going forward? What type of locker room will you have? And can you produce wins, right? Not winning the AFC North is unacceptable for this team this year, and Mike Tomlin and Ben Roethlisberger will both be in question if that doesn't happen.
One of the other things that we didn't mention is Le'Veon Bell, and him tweeting about somebody with curiosity because they mentioned the Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously, there's the Indianapolis Colts out there, the Green Bay Packers out there, others. What's the best situation for Le'Veon Bell that he should be pursuing?
Well, I mean, you made the point earlier. If you could get to Philadelphia and be on that team and be coached, they're a team that has a winning pedigree and a winning coach, a good quarterback. I think that's a good spot if you can get there. I feel like Doug Peterson gets away from the run a little bit, but, you made a very interesting point. If Le'Veon Bell's there, maybe he doesn't. When I look at the Indianapolis Colts, I think that would be the best spot. I just don't know if the Indianapolis Colts make that move with Marlon Mack becoming an impact player down the stretch of the season, having a really good early game against the Houston Texans in the playoffs. So I think that place doesn't fit. So my next spot would be the Houston Texans. This is a team with a great number one wide receiver. You have a quarterback who's on his first deal, so you'll have the money to go out and make a move. And Lamar Jackson, who is your starter now, is nowhere near close to who Le'Veon Bell is, and also has 1 year left on his deal that you can get rid of. Obviously, the Texans have had some O-line problems, but I believe with the rushing attack, you add that to the play-action games, getting guys free on the outside. This is a place where Le'Veon Bell can go and change things and also help tremendously in the passing game.
What about the New York Jets?
New York Jets had seemed to be the spot. I think from a standpoint of being in a big city, being in a big market, having young, exciting players like Jamal Adams on defense, it would be an exciting place to go. I don't necessarily know if Le'Veon Bell going there immediately produces wins. And I think as much as he wants the money, and I think that's the place he will go, I know he wants to be successful on the field individually and also win. And I don't think that move right away guarantees Le'Veon Bell wins like he wants.
As it pertains to the New York Giants, I mean, we hear the name Odell Beckham Jr. We've heard the potential out there for trades because the great Jay Glazer spoke up about it. He didn't report it as news or any stretch. He just said he had a feeling that OBJ would be traded. The Giants have now come out. They've made it very clear he's not going anywhere. What do you think about what you're seeing and hearing from the New York Giants specifically as it pertains to Odell Beckham Jr.?
I think there's no way, no how, Stephen A. Odell Beckham Jr. should be in trade talks. I don't think that's a guy you give up. That type of talent belongs on your team. That type of will to win and compete belongs on your team. Odell Beckham Jr. is the one player on that team other than Saquon Barkley who shows up every time he's on the grass. And so to even be thinking about moving him, or for that to even be a conversation that the New York Giants are willing to have when you continuously roll Eli Manning out there and allow him to be your starting quarterback is absolutely ridiculous to me.
Ryan Clark right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Before I let you get on out of here, let me ask you about Colin Kaepernick. Obviously, he settled. You and I haven't had an opportunity to talk about this since it happened. He settled his grievance with the National Football League, both he and Eric Reed. My issue was very, very simple, Ryan Clark, because obviously you're not just a football, but you weren't just a football player and a champion. You were also on correct me if I'm wrong, was it the executive committee or the negotiating committee for the NFL?
Committee.
The executive committee for the NFL Players Association. So you know a thing or two about this stuff. Here's the deal. Colin Kaepernick reaches a settlement. Now, the Players Association, although they were involved, they were pushed in the background by Colin Kaepernick because he wanted his own individual representation. I've never understood why the NFL Players Association didn't file their own grievance on his behalf, whether he liked it or not, but that's a different story for another day. My question to you would be this. The settlement was reached. I want to know details. I want to know exactly what you capitulated to. Talk to me about that, please.
No, I absolutely do. I think, one of the things that's been hard with Colin Kaepernick ever since this started and once he was out of the league was the lack of communication, the lack of him not speaking up and kind of keeping us abreast as to what he was doing, why he was doing it, where the protest and where the work has led, and where he sits with the NFL. Because this protest wasn't started to get money. Obviously, the suit of the NFL on the collusion side was to, at least I thought, was to try to get back into the NFL. And if not, get enough money or a certain amount of money that lets you know that they felt like they were wrong, right, and that they have admitted to that. And so for me to just get a certain amount of money and for people to not know, right, for him to not say, this is why I took this certain amount of money, it was enough for me to say, okay, I'll settle the suit, and now I'm attempting to continue to play football and get back in the NFL. I would like to know what they gave him that made him say, what you have done to me in light of my protest, is now okay with me.
Well, I got to tell you something. I got a different perspective, slightly different. My attitude is this. I don't care about his money. Whatever money you got, whatever money you got. What I want to know is what he capitulated to. Are you gonna be out of the NFL forever? Are you gonna come back to the NFL? If you do come back to the NFL, are you gonna stand for the national anthem or take a knee? What exactly were the stipulations you capitulated to in order to settle this case? That's what I want to know, Ryan.
Yeah, you know what? And now that you bring up that point, that is actually a huge point. I think that's what a ton of people would like to know, and that kind of goes along with me saying whatever you settled on to make it feel like it was okay what has happened to you. And for him to settle, it makes me feel like they told him there's a possibility of him getting to play in the league. But you also know on the other side of that, there were some things he had to say that he was willing to do in order for that to be a possibility. So if Colin Kaepernick comes out and tells us, well, in order to get this settlement, I had to say that if I was back in the league, I would not kneel, I would not protest, that would be very disheartening for me.
Ryan Clark, always appreciate you, brother. Thanks a lot, man. Talk to you soon. Ryan Clark right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. You're listening live to the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio, ESPN News. We'll get back to your calls and more with everything Ryan Clark had to say in a minute. By the way, do you have frequent heartburn? Like the kind where you have antacids stashed everywhere in case it pops up? You know what I mean. You keep some in your